Hey everybody, welcome to Tuesday, Cinco de Mayo. We're here today to talk about the questions I'm being asked about remote work right now. Now, we've all been doing this for a bunch of weeks now, and maybe it's going to end for some of us sooner than others, but the reality is that the questions are still coming in and the issues are real. And I'm going to talk about three specific questions that I've received recently, some of them multiple times, and I'm going to help you think about them in hopefully some new and helpful ways. And I want to answer any questions that you have as well. So if you're with me here live, ask those questions, share them with me. If you're here later watching it on replay, then just type your questions in as comments and we'll get them in a future day. So my name's Kevin Eikenberry, and I am going to share with you some thoughts about working remotely today. Up in the top corner, you see a picture of a book that you can go to Amazon now and pre-order. It's called The Long Distance Teammate. Not available now because it's not coming out for several months, unfortunately, but you can pre-order a copy now. And you're following the right guy because we're going to be talking about it a lot over the coming weeks and months leading up to that and having all sorts of content available to you as we get closer. Speaking of content, let me just put this across the bottom. If you're not aware of our portal that we have made available and has been available since the 18th of March, to help you with remote leadership and remote work, all things about that, you can go to kevineikenberry.com/COVID-19 to get everything that you might want there. Tons and tons of free content, including replays of all of the pasts of these Q&As, of which this is the 23rd one. Yeah, I've been asked a lot of questions, and we've been trying to answer a lot of questions as well. So let's get on with some of them now. And the one that I've been asked a lot lately by Tracy and about 5 other people is related to best suggestions for having a routine and creating work-life balance while working from home. And when I say 5 or so other people, some are asking about the work-life balance, some are asking about the routines, and I love that Tracy, the way she asked the specific question, because it hooks them together in an appropriate way. And so let's actually start with the second half about work-life balance. So my belief about work-life balance is that it's a balance. And so if you think about anything that balances, like a scale, as it balances, it's always moving. It's not a static place. What work-life balance looks like now might be different than what it looked like 8 weeks ago, what it looked like for you a year ago, or might look like for you a year from now. And so I think the first thing that we must do is get clear about what kind of balance are we looking for. And I can't answer that for you, only you can decide that. And exactly what you're dealing with during this shutdown may impact what that looks like for you. But the question, I will tell you, for me personally, it looks very different than it did in the second half of March and the very early part of April. It looks different now than it did then. The question for you is, what is the balance that you're looking for? Before you can work on improving it, you got to know what it is that you actually want, which means that you need to think about where it is and where you'd like it to be. And again, only you can answer that. But I do think that Tracy's point about routine is absolutely connected to it. So let's talk about routines for a minute. I was just talking to my lovely and talented assistant, Marissa. Say hello, Marissa.
Hello.
Who is monitoring LinkedIn as we're doing this. So if you have questions there, I will know about them through Marissa. I was just talking to Marissa earlier about routines before we went live and about the importance of them and in having them, depending on whatever it is that we're doing right now. So here's a few things I would say about routines. Number one, you need them. I've been doing coaching with folks over the last few weeks, and that topic has come up more than once. If you feel like you're drifting without a routine right now, many people, the first week or two of the shutdown, they sort of got through it, figured it out, right? Maybe we're working super hard, didn't have a lot of work-life balance right then. But as things have settled in a little bit, they still feel like they don't have a routine. So my suggestion, number one, is you got to have one. Number two, you got to have them. I think you fundamentally want routines at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. You may have others, but those are the two that you automatically had when you went to your workplace that you don't automatically have now. So I want to talk about beginning of the day and end of the day just a little bit, and we wrote about that quite a bit, or are writing about, I should say, in the book that you see up there in the corner, The Long Distance Teammate. But start of day, when you went to the workplace, as you did some things, you brushed your teeth and all the sorts of things, right? That's fine. But you had some things that you did before you got in your car and went to work. But right now, what many of you are doing is you're just getting up, rolling out of bed, doing whatever personal hygiene you're choosing to do, and then going into work in the other room, maybe on the nightstand, wherever the laptop is, wherever the work is. So the first thing I want you to do is to start to say, well, what is it about my routine that I had before that helped me? And how do I replicate that now? In our book, The Long Distance Leader, which here's a copy of that, The Long Distance Leader. In that book, we talked about the first rule that we mentioned in that book is the idea that leadership first, location second. And the same thing is true for us as workers. It's the work first, where we do it second. So you had some things that hopefully got you ready to be successful when you were working in your workplace. You don't have to get in the car. You don't have to get on the subway or whatever now, but there's some things that you did that got you ready for work. And if those things worked for you before, make sure you're doing them now too. Right? At a minimum, what I want you to do, if you're working from home and right now all you're doing is beelining it to the laptop, is I want you to take care of you for a little bit. Maybe that's a short walk. Maybe that's a short reading. Maybe that's some prayer or meditation. I want you to do something that separates the getting up from the I'm working now part. So before, again, you had automatic things that you had to do. Now I want you to create those things. This is actually a chance to create some better routines that you might even want to keep when you do go back to the workplace. So first thing is figure out what you need and then put those in. And don't just go immediately. Create some sort of structure that allows you to be successful. End of the day, you've got to stop the work. And I know that right now with it, it's all around you. And you may say, well, Kevin, I have my stuff all strung out on the kitchen table and it stays there. Well, I had a conversation right here a couple of days ago, last week actually, with Mara Thomas. And she said, Kevin, if that's what you've got, she's a productivity expert. She said, if that's your situation, just put a blanket over all that work. If you don't have a bunch of papers, you just have the laptop, she and I agree, close the laptop. Anything that's a clue to say, I'm not in work mode now. This is bad enough for your getting back into the workplace stuff. So I would set some boundaries for yourself, set some rules for yourself, create some routines for yourself that will help you. And that may help you some with the work-life balance stuff, as well as some of the stuff around routines. If you've got follow-up questions for me on that, please ask them and we can say some more. But on that, we're going to move forward. I want to tell you too that as it relates to being a remote worker, that we've created a product that we're very excited about. We've had it out for several months. It's called How to Become a Great Remote Teammate. If you've learned anything in the last few weeks, there's a big difference between working from home and being a great remote teammate. And we've created a product called, as I said, 12 weeks. You can go to remoteleadershipinstitute.com/12 weeks to learn all about it. Multiple ways to get that content. You can get it all at once on demand, so you can binge watch it. Better, maybe not more entertaining, but better for you than what you've got on Netflix. You can have it come out to you 1 week at a time, and we're just in the process of creating a few of the individual weeks of content or skills that you can purchase separately. So you can learn more. remoteleadershipinstitute.com/12 weeks. Hope you'll do that. Question number 2 today comes from Charlie. Actually, Charlie asked me a question that's along this lines, and I created it more as an actual question. Charlie said, how do I have influence on things now, even if I don't have positional power? Again, it's not exactly how he asked me, but it's close. And I think it's an important question. Because here's the thing. All of us have now been working from home for several weeks, and we're getting some clue about what's working and what's not. And so if you're sitting out here as an individual contributor, or even as a leader in the middle, and you'd like to have some influence on some folks above you, what do? Well, first of all, don't assume that you must have positional power in order to have influence. It's just not true. If we assume that, we won't ever say anything. So the first thing I would say is to recognize that you have some experience. Own the fact that you have some experience. You've been working from home now for 8 weeks or 7 or however long. You know what's working or what's not. And maybe those above you need to understand the challenges that you're facing. You need to understand what you need so that they can help. Sometimes they just are unaware of the situations that you're being put in, or their situation is quite different from yours. I've been telling leaders for weeks to work on being more empathetic and understanding where your team members are. If they're not doing that, we need to let them know. Now, I don't want you to do that in a way that is judgmental or harsh, or why haven't you thought of this? Because that isn't going to help you anyway. What I want you to do is to say, hey, boss, let's just say that Charlie is my boss. So Charlie, I'd love to have a conversation about some of the things I'm experiencing as we're doing this work from home. Would you be open to that? Chances are Charlie's going to say, sure. Now, if Charlie's not even open to that, you've probably got bigger challenges with Charlie as your boss than this. But let's just assume that you first of all, you need to open up the conversation. And chances are, if you open it up from a place of curiosity, from a place of trying to help create improvement, not from a place of blame, you'll get a chance to be heard. Second of all, make sure that what you're sharing matches up with the boss's needs. How can we do that in a way that will make sense and help the boss meet their goals, or senior leadership meet their goals? Don't just go, let's just take this as an example. And we talked about this on a recent live as well. I'm just thinking about this as an example. Let's say that you're thinking, man, I'd really like to be able to work from home long term. How do I influence that? Well, you don't just go out and say, you are going to let us work from home later, aren't you? Well, don't go there. What you want to do is start to understand what they're already thinking, because they may already be thinking it. You want to find out what their concerns and worries and goals are for a transition back. Also, you can put your needs or your hopes or your goals in alignment with that and hook it into the conversation. So, super important thing to consider. Okay. In fact, just having this conversation with you right now leads me to think about a person named Mary Abbajay, Abbajay, Mary Abbajay, who is a colleague of mine, an author who wrote a book called Managing Up. And as I'm saying these words, I'm saying you ought to get a copy of Mary's book, and maybe I can get her to come join me for a future live, and we can talk about managing up during remote work. Maybe we can get her to come on and join me. So I'm going to do a call out to Mary Abbajay now, and I'm going to reach out to her later today because I think it's an important question. So we can have influence. Don't be afraid to try to be influential, but don't do it from a place of anything other than a place of being helpful and of sharing what others might not know. If you'll do that, you've got a much better chance of success. Okay, third question. Third question that I got came from Hope. And this is a big question that I am not prepared to answer completely here. In fact, this is a question I'm going to be writing a lot about and talking a lot about in the coming week or so. But I wanted to at least acknowledge that it's the current question. And I wanted to acknowledge the need for it and the need for us to be thinking about it. I've been working with a couple of leadership teams where they're starting to think about this. Now, how do we evaluate the factors for a return to work plan? Well, you've got to think about your business's situation. You've got to think about the culture that you have and the culture that you want. You've got to think about what the productivity you have now is, in relationship to the one that you want. You need to think those things through first. Too often, what leaders are doing right now is, well, we're going to bring everybody back. And so they're making a decision, or the opposite. Well, maybe we don't need to bring anybody back. And they're starting with that decision. And then how do we take the steps to get to that decision? Rather, I think what we ought to be doing now is, what have we learned over the last 8 weeks? What's working and what's not? How does that impact what we might do moving forward? And I also think that the reality says that we probably need to be building contingency plans. So what could be happening? Well, what could happen is, are we going to be able to bring everybody back at once? Now, I am not an expert in the 35-page document that OSHA has put out saying, here are the things you've got to do before you bring people back. But you need to know it exists, and you need to work through all that. I think you need to be thinking about a contingency that says, we're bringing back some people, or we're bringing people back in stages. What's the contingency if in our state it's determined in August that school won't start, or that school will be e-learning in the fall? Does that impact what you need to do as a business because of how you work with schools, or your team members that are parents that are going to have to deal with that? I think that you need to think about the various contingencies in your state and with your team, and you need to start thinking about that. I also think that you need to survey your team about where they stand on this in terms of what they want. As an individual leader, I'd be encouraging you to ask your team members what they want in terms of a return. We're working on a survey that we'll be releasing soon, and we'll be asking people to take this survey across organizations and around the world to find out how they're what they want. Do I want to come back to the office? Am I ready to come back to the office? When do I want to come back? Do I want to come back full-time? Do I want to come back part-time? All of those are questions that need to be understood in terms of what your team wants and needs, not just because you're going to bow to their wants and needs, but because you need to know where they stand. So where are we now, productivity-wise? Where are we now in terms of the culture-wise? Where are we now in terms of a variety of factors? Quality of work, volume of work. Where are we now in terms of what we need to meet our customers' needs? All those things. Take those into account into building your factors for a return to the workplace plan, is how I would change Hope's question. And I will just tell you that I'm going to be talking a lot more about this issue in the coming days and weeks. And so be watching here. Go to my blog at blog.kevineichenberry.com. We'll get a link in here for you on that. And know too that we're continuing to provide you resources in a variety of ways. And these live Q&As are one of the resources we're trying to provide. Another thing we're trying to do, I'll put this back on the bottom, is our resource site, kevineichenberry.com/COVID-19. It's all learning resources, tools to help you as a remote leader and a remote team member. And if you are a leader, you are also a team member. Please think about that. And then lastly, we've started to put together some of our other resources, and resources that you would need to invest in. And you can see those here, resources that would help you and your team, both in the specifics of working remotely, as well as meeting your other learning needs, but doing it all virtually. And you can get access to that information at kevineichenberry.com/remote-insider. Strange name, but that's where you'll find it. So I just want to ask Marissa, I think I know the answer, but Marissa, anything that's come in?
No questions. I did mention Mary Abijay's book after you had mentioned it and how much we enjoy managing up. And so somebody has already said that they have added it to their to-order list.
It's awesome. And Marissa, if you can quickly, and we'll make sure we get this in the other channels after this is over, but go find her podcast episode, if you would, real quick.
Yeah.
Get that in LinkedIn for us, because Mary was on the podcast and we had a great conversation. And one of my tasks for this afternoon is to reach out to Mary and hopefully see if we can get her to join me for an upcoming lunch time live. So with that, everybody, thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure, as always, to answer your questions. If you are watching later and you have a question for me, don't worry about whether it's already been asked, because since I've done this 23 times, I'm not going to ask you to go search for it. Although if you do go to the COVID-19 site there, you will find that under each live, there are the topics that we talked about. So you might find what you want, but feel free to ask it. Be happy to answer it again in the next few days. Thank you all so much for being here. Marissa, thanks for helping as always. And we'll be back tomorrow, maybe with a guest. You never know. Until then, be well, be safe, be remarkable.